Good morning, it's Joyful Hermit, late morning. I want to remind everyone that when I share experiences I've had, or even a deep innate sense of something that has been so long in me that it's as if it's an innate knowing, but it may not be accurate. I don't know, other than what I sense and know, and how it sort of plays out in the temporal world. But I also want to remind that I'm sharing these things not that this is for me, but as God told me, this is for everyone, not just for me. Or actually, the Holy Spirit told that to Dr. H, that all these things that were shown me or I understand from within or through also in temporal situations or through supernatural ones, it's for everyone. And not that we all will experience things in the same way, but we can. There are certain basics that we can always ask God for things that, and especially things that are God's will, and or let Him decide what He wants to tell us or when. Some things actually end up, depending on the phase we're in, as too much for us to bear at the time. Too much truth of a reality of which we have not been opened up to yet by God. We have not basically allowed ours. I'm getting my heat pack here sort of straightened out from my gut. And I won't say anything about how I feel other than I'm so grateful because I feel so much better. I feel so much better. I dug out canna bulbs yesterday, and today I might do a little bit of raking of leaves or something, tidying up outside. So that gives a positive indication that I am on an upswing and appreciating this stuff. I have no idea if this Szilagyi is doing much for me. I'm sure it will take quite a bit of time because you only take a little quarter of a teaspoon underneath the tongue with some hot water, as they say, the best way. But it has 85 minerals in it, and but you're not to take too much of it. So we'll just see how that helps. But my enzymes, and I honestly have no clue when I got these enzymes that I found in my pantry. No recollection at all. Part of them were used probably sometime last year in an attempt to feel better, or I was having terrible brain fog and didn't know what was going on, although it didn't follow Alzheimer's. I got tested for that. Dr. H tested me for dementia and Alzheimer's. And no, but it was my thyroid had gone out, and brain fog is considered that. But so I'm very grateful to all of these helps. And granted, some supplements don't do that much for us. Just depends, but others help. And these are helping. The enzymes definitely immediately have been helping. So, and also the positive. And I shared that with my friend with the COPD to not be assuming that she's in a point of her breathing and of her lungs that it's not going to improve again, that she's hit a new lower level that's going to stay with her breathing. She doesn't know. We don't know. We mustn't, through our own blocks we put up, essentially be telling God, no, I'm not going to do better, or I've declined and I won't rebound. We don't know what God wants to do, but if we're already thinking it, then how does that make God feel? I don't know, but I would think He would. Of course, He's God. He doesn't think like us, but we would think, well, we'll move on to the next person. So there was a person who my pain doctor had wanted me to help her. She has terrible knee issues from surgery 4 years ago. So I texted her, or I tried calling her, and she didn't answer, but she immediately texted back that she was very busy, very busy. This was a few weeks ago, and probably wouldn't have time to talk. So I just texted back and said, well, I think the doctor just wanted me to share some research that I've done, and I mentioned a couple things. Immediately she texts back, or maybe she called even. Oh, well, it sounds like you do have something that you could tell me. And immediately I already knew I was dealing with a person who was resistant, who had pride, and when she spoke on the phone, I could tell that she had a lot of, she was of means, of financial means. She's a year older than me. 4 years ago, she had her knee replacement. It didn't work out. She had a hard time finding another doctor to operate on her, but she found someone because she wanted it fixed. She wanted it to be better, wave the wand, gonna be better, because she had just bought a new truck with a new RV, that she'd gotten bored with this area and was going to start driving around the country for some adventure in her life. Plus, she wanted to snow ski. She was already snow skiing with her 4-year-old grandson and wanted to continue that. She was a very active person. And at that time, she was 69, now she's 73. So she didn't like at all, and who would, that her knee was terrible. And she had recently started to go to the pain doctor, been to all kinds of doctors, but the pain was horrific. Hey, I understood what pain she was dealing with because my surgery was a failure, and it was terrible pain. Um, so I mentioned, the different research I'd done. She mentioned that thought she was going to get into a trial study at Mayo Clinic, and she had given, or the pain doctor had asked her for the number of the doctor to give to me, thinking, well, it'd be good if I could also be in on that trial. And I said, yes, I would do anything to help other people to avoid this arthrofibrosis that afflicts 4 to 6% of total knee replacement patients. That's the statistic of failure with it. And the arthrofibrotic impervious web-like tissue that can grow over it. But I had done a lot of research on this tissue and how it is caused and why it is caused, and starts during surgery. So that's why within 2 weeks my knee was a bulbous, huge, taut, uh, crying out with pain mess. That was my knee. But I had range of motion because I'm used to pain, and I would force it. I would force it to move. We had to keep it. You have to get range of motion going. So I had range of motion. It wasn't that I wasn't moving my knee, which I think that was her case. She wasn't used to any suffering in her life, and she didn't move it enough after her surgery. So they had to do what's called MUA, manual under anesthetic, or anyway, those initials, but it meant that they put her under an anesthetic to move her knee around so that it would start to break up that tissue forcibly, and then into more physical therapy. But that didn't work, or else she didn't cooperate. I don't know. If she didn't then do her exercises or things, then you're in trouble because it just stiffens up again. But she said she was a small boned person, so she got this other surgeon. I didn't recognize his name, and I had checked lots of surgeons in the area, and my pain doctor had referred me to this one because he's known to be technically very good. Um, so she just got sort of anyone to do the second surgery after she'd had the under anesthetic manipulation, UAM, that's what it's called. Um, and so he did this surgery. She ended up in worst case. And she went around to even more surgeons, and finally to the one that I had, who he doesn't relate well with people, but they want to earn money. Most of them do. And some will do it no matter what. So the one that I'd had, offered to work on her knee for the third time, which fortunately she decided against. She recognized that he didn't relate well with her. Well, he doesn't with anyone. He's maybe on the spectrum slightly of autism or something. some kind of a slight personality disorder, but he's technically a good surgeon. But if you are not a success like I was not, he was done. He was done with it. Nope, nothing more can be done. Blah, blah, boom, boom, out you go. And it was my pain doctor who insisted with him that he do something because of all that I was doing. And the fact that I had such good range of motion meant that I wasn't not trying to move my knee after surgery. I couldn't for about a week, but some doctors even have you rest for a week first. And my doctor's nurse had said, don't, this is your time to rest and heal this week. Wait till the in home physical therapist comes. And he came at day 9. So, but I had been moving it, but the exercises that I had done that I was told to do, just basic ones, interfered with my spine. So my spine went out of whack in terrible pain. So when my spine gets that way, I have to lay still 2 to 3 days. So anyway, that was the story of what I explained to her had happened, the research I had done, and how this arthrofibrosis operates. Well, the only reason she knew the name arthrofibrosis, no surgeon had used it with her, which they hadn't with me, but I researched and found out what it was. I had mentioned it to the pain doctor who had done some reading on it, and he told her that that was the name of what she had here 4 years later, after she'd had all these, she'd had 3 under anesthetic procedures and 2 major surgeries on her knee, and had tried to get something else done to it, but fortunately did not, because I think one surgeon who was compassionate and ethical told her that her lower bone, where they screw this metal joint into, had already had too much wear and tear on it, with these screws going down. These bolts go down into your lower leg bone, and that might be part of her problem now. Maybe it just healed wrong, and it can't take much more. And at our ages, I mean, for pity's sakes. But she was not accepting this at all. But she was excited about being in this. She was sure she was going to be accepted for this study, this research study. And the number that she gave my surgeon to call was incorrect for me to call. She gave him a wrong number, but gave him the name of the doctor, but she had the names reversed. He's from India. His last name's Matthew, not first name, but she had that. And so I could tell she isn't one to research or do much herself to find out things. But she was excited about being in that study because she was sure he was going to develop a medicine to take, a pill to take that would make her better, would get rid of her problem, her arthrofibrosis. And even if that research surgeon at Mayo Clinic was going to start a medication or tried to discover one, a pill, she and I aren't going to be alive when that gets on the market. But I researched more because she refused to give me his number. 3 times I asked, and I'll tell you how it goes. I'll tell you how I do with it. She didn't want to share. Us girls can be naughty. We can be tricky women. And I realized, well, I don't have the money to be flying there, and my dogs, to put them in boarding again, it's hard on them, and that costs money. I don't have money for that. And I realized that I was doing my thing. I'd heard about this castor oil, and I was doing that treatment every night. So I even told her about that. I said, I'm doing this castor oil treatment every night, and it's really helping. I said, part of my scar you don't even see anymore. But I said, it makes my knee feel better in the morning. When I get up, it feels soothed and like it's helping it. And that castor oil is the oil that will penetrate the deepest of any oil, natural oil, and has curative or healing qualities to it. And I said I had heard about how it would dissolve uh, lumps in breasts, like nodules and things. And one person had even reported a cancerous tumor had gone away, but who knows? And the doctor who reported that was being very cautious about that, just saying that that had been reported to her. So we don't have proof of that. But hey, I would try it, especially what happened with my knee. So within the next 3 or 4 weeks, I could really tell with my knee that it was nearly the size of my regular knee. It had gone down. The surgeon said it would never go down. And it had hardened, but I could move it more. It wasn't painful like it had been. Of course, if I rile it up, yes, when I tried a sport thinking I could build up my body that way, was no, I can't. It was too bad on my spine for one thing, but also it did cause my knee to swell up, and I'm working on getting it down. I've mentioned this in other videos, but not everyone listens to them. Anyway, so I told her about this. I didn't go into detail about it because immediately she said, well, good for you. Good for you. I'm going to go do this. She says, I'm going to hear from them this week. She says, I'm sure I'm going to be accepted. So fine. And I get off the phone. I start researching this. He isn't even, that is not his research study. His research study at Mayo Clinic is to find a genetic connection to try to prove that arthrofibrosis can be a genetic inherited trait that certain people would have. Well, my surgeon had told me he thought mine was came from genetic, because I suppose he had seen my range of motion from the physical therapist. But of course, other people were trying to tell me, well, you just didn't do enough exercises. It was your fault. Even this first physical therapist intimated that that was the real reason. It wasn't genetic. I doubted the genetic connection with me because I've had other surgeries, and I certainly didn't have this rapid growth of fibrotic tissue around my spine or um, my hand. My first knee surgery didn't have that result. So that's when I started researching arachnoiditis and its connection with oxidative stress. And that's what causes, at root, it's oxidative stress that causes the collagen tissues to grow, wildly grow, rapidly and thickly, starting in surgery. And the oxidative stress, that's a lack of oxygen in the cells, can come from shock of pain, the pain during surgery, or if a person, this is a good thing for us to know based on what I was reminded of keeping positive, of even emotional pain that we carry into surgery with us from other aspects of our lives, or the amount of physical pain we're in, which could have been with my spine, or how painful even the knee and our body reaction to pain. But mine is a direct correlation from arachnoiditis, which automatically will cause oxidative stress. It's very, very painful. Arachnoiditis is an extremely painful spinal nerve ailment, with a direct cause of a puncture or a slit in the arachnoid membrane of the spinal cord, or it could have been from a myelogram injection back before 1988, in my case, where the state I was in. The myelogram dye was faulty. And another viewer, that's the exact cause of why her arachnoiditis came, was from a myelogram with the bad dye that's now been off the market. In the state I was in since 1988, a year after I had the surgery. And I had a myelogram about 5 days before surgery, but it was 2 nights after the surgery that within 48 hours that I had my first horrific spinal headache. That was the indicator of the extreme pain, and I didn't get better from pain at all. So, and it's gotten worse over time, but I've adapted. My body has adapted. God has graced me with being able to adapt and accept. And of course, I have to take pain medication, which is the only medication that is known to take the edge off of arachnoiditis. I checked with the major Mayo, Cleveland, Mayfield Neurological, opioids, unfortunately, or in my case, praise God for them, are the only thing that will help arachnoiditis, not heal it, but endure the pain of it. There is no reversal of it, no healing of it. Even though there is one doctor who claims that he has um, procedures or supplements or diets or different things that will help. That's not been proven accurate. Um, Although he's a very interesting and very well-intentioned doctor, and if anybody has, fine. So that's how I look at that. But anyway, so I was telling her that stuff. But anyway, so she got off the phone. Good for you. But she says, I'll report back to you how it goes for me at Mayo Clinic. So, I guess I'm old enough that I just, tricky woman, and, the kind of girls that we knew in junior high or younger, uh, just in for themselves, and could be anybody's, not just girls, but I sort of label it as tricky women. And I had researched and found out, well, she's not going to get what she thinks she's going to get, even if she's in that study. His study was not to develop a medication for it, to make it go away. There's no magic wands. And fortunately, way back after my spine surgery was a failure, and we didn't know it was arachnoiditis then. My GP, the family doctor, who was the wonderful Bible study at the church we went to, my children and myself, and he had invited us to that church, which was very kind of him. And it was a wonderful church for us at the time, a Lutheran church. But he could keep saying, you've got to come down to reality. You've got to come down to reality. And he says, there's no magic wand. But at first he said, I am going to do all I can to help you and to see if I can fix you. Find anyone who can fix this. And he did so much trying. He totally did, until he had to realize, we all had to realize that, and then God came through with through Teresa of Avila and John the Baptist and Luke the physician and the Holy Spirit, explaining through locutions and waking visions during, I was awake but had these visions, that this was God's will, and God was allowing this for my spiritual good and for my purpose and mission in life. I was called to suffer. And that was repeated later on. Literally, called to suffer. Those words, called to suffer. You are called to suffer. So in all these other ways. So and so my knee, of course, I grasped it after the initial upset, and I got depressed with it because I thought, now this too. But I understood soon, figured it out by the help of my angel, I'm sure, that God was making sure that I was going to not rush back into a lot of manual labor, but in doing my mission, what he had sent me back to fulfill my mission, share and talk about all that God has done and how he does things, and that it's not just for me or certain people. The means of it he might have for certain people, because he knows what's best. But other people will be more sensitive than me and grasp things spiritually and intuitively, and won't need to be hit over the head with phenomenon. That's a good thing. It's a good thing if you get it without supernatural things having to happen to get you to understand. And so I don't have that much supernatural. Well, I consider life supernatural. I consider events that happen, like this woman, to be meant, and God needed that for at many levels for me and for her. So I got this text message 2 days ago. Well, it's three or 4 days ago now. She'd been to the doctor, probably for pain meds for her terrible knee, which does sound horrible. And she stays in bed, too much pain. And so that's been a long time. She's not been able to do much. And very upset. But she said that he had told her that I was out doing this sport, doing great. My knee was amazing, miraculous, that she needed to call me. Well, I'd learned in the first conversation that she's got sort of the snake of pride is wrapped around her ankles. And she can't function real well with that going on. We can't. We've got to be humbled down. And maybe that's partly why her knee is the way it is. There's always spiritual reasons. God always has reasons other than just plain temporal, oh, it was a failure. No, life is much deeper. Many layers, many facets to the diamonds of our life, of our finely cut diamonds. They're cut by God and formed, each of us. All these facets that are to our lives at many levels of understanding, and spiritual and temporal and everything, all making our glorious lives. So she didn't call, though. No one tells her what to do. I learned that too. So she went, but she texted. So I thought she wanted me to call her. And I thought, I don't think so. I think I'm just going to text, because that way I could lay out exactly what I was doing, what I had done with my knee, and I still do every night. Do my castor oil treatment, because it's not there yet. It's still not, I still have to get it down where it was before, from when I foolishly thought I could build up my body too soon, playing a sport, trying to. And so anyway, so I texted her and told her, that no, I'd had to stop the sport, but it was because of my spine. But I did say that it did cause my knee to rile up, but it's gone back down, but not totally. So I'll continue doing my castor oil treatment, probably a year or a year and a half even. But I had told her before that I'm a bit by bit person, when she said, well, good for you. And she sounds like a lot of bother. And I said, well, I'm in a position in my life that whatever crumb is tossed my way, I gratefully take. And if it's just a little bit that is helped, that's a little bit more than I had before. That's my attitude with everything. That, like yesterday, I was up like 3 or 4 hours. Well, that's more than I was the day before. So it's a mindset that we learn when I myself was too proud, and God had to humble me down in big ways. And a lot back when I was ages 33 to 36 was a great deal of cutting me down, and axe to the roots of all kinds of attitudes, and I'd had such a wonderful childhood, and gifts and talents given me. The world lay at my, it was, and I wanted to do good for God. I always wanted to do something for God. From way, way back, I wanted to do good. And I couldn't understand why God was hindering me until He explained why. Yeah, I am called too easily out into the world and get distracted by the world, and then I forget that I'm going to do what God wants, not what I thought. I was going to help the poor, I was going to do this and that, I was going to teach or be a great administrator to uplift and encourage teachers, to lift up a high school or something, to educate youth more. and to have a great deal of enthusiasm for educating the students. That was a good thing, but it wasn't the good thing God wanted of me. God had wanted spiritual of me, and probably still wants me to write, so I'm not going all off topic a lot. But so I texted what I did in detail, so she'd have no question about even where I wrapped around. I use these little things that come from the puppy pad. I use puppy pad cut in half. I happen to have them. Or you could use saran wrap, but I use this because it has and these were cheap at Walmart, a whole box of them. And I never used them for my dogs, but they've come in handy for my knee. And it's got this layer there, so the oil soaks in there. And I use them like 3 or 4 times in a row, so they're pretty cost effective. And then the plastic keeps the oil from leaking. And I tie them 3 places: top, middle of my knee, and bottom. And then use my heat pack on it all night. I even said every time I get up to go to the restroom, I reheat the heat pack and put it back on. So it's got pretty much heat all through the night, soaking that oil in even more. And I explained to her that at first I sort of did it for the scar or something, because my scar was enormous. You can imagine with the knee so puffed up and tight and hard. And that scar was just like a ridge going on it. And I thought, well, this lady on Facebook or something, a little short reel or something, had said how effective it was and curative, this doctor and doctor of naturopathy or something, and would help skin, all kinds of skin issues. I've been taking moles off my neck with it, put it on my neck and they come off, and most of them anyway. So, and it's took my knee down then. First, my scar just got so good that in-home physical therapist did notice that. But we didn't notice the knee coming down. It was after him. It was 3.5 to 4 months before I noticed the knee was going down. And and then maybe 5 months, it was down just about even with my other knee. The physical therapist was amazed and wanted to know the process so he could tell other patients about it. And as I mentioned, the pain doctor wants to write it up in a journal. So I gave her all that information, and her response continues, well, it sounds like a lot of effort. That was all she said. And then she also said, well, you certainly went to a lot of detail, wrote out a lot of detail. And I texted back and it said exactly why I wrote that detail. I said, because this wonderful thing has happened to my knee. And I said, also, I prayed and asked God to help me, even from the very start, to help me endure the pain of the knee. And then when I knew that it was a failure, to ask for a miraculous healing. But I continued with the temporal, and just figured in my mind, if it loosened up nodules, then it would possibly loosen up this fibrotic tissue. Who knows? Worth a try. And it did make it feel better. I'll take a little bit of feel better for the first 5 minutes of my day. Yes, it's better than no feel better. So I wrote her that, and I said, and you might want to say a prayer also if you try this. But I said, you'll get used to the bother of it. I said, I don't consider it a bother. When I got results and when it felt better, then it's worth. And I said, I really slather the oil on and wrap that half a puppy pad up around and tie it. Maybe it takes me 3 minutes, 4, and then I said, I do pray. And I said, I can't thank God enough for what he's done for me through castor oil. I said, it's a natural bean from a castor tree. So there's nothing strange about it. And I said, you and I are of an age that I said we've lived a lot of life. and know that difficult things just don't go away with the wave of a wand. It takes a little effort, and it takes time. The more difficult sometimes, the more time. But I said, maybe you would have a miracle of God, and it would be immediately improved for you. But I said, since it's gone on 4 years for you, you may have to count on doing it for a year or two to see some effects. I said, I don't know. But I said, I said, I was in enough pain that I was willing to do anything to help it. And I said, if you're not a person who prays, know that I'm praying for you because I believe in prayer. And she didn't respond at all then, but I gathered that she wasn't accepted to that Mayo Clinic study, or she wouldn't have still been wanting to find out what was going on, or other than curiosity. Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen had 3 of the worst characteristics of males and of women. And I remember some of them. Male was lust, was one. Lust, and I think anger were 2 of those for men. Maybe competitive was the 3rd. For women, it was envy. Envy, I think gossip was one, and maybe temper, or pride, maybe. So, but I know envy was one, and gossip. But so I don't know, but she's resistant, and it took me a while writing all this out to her, and then again explaining how I have viewed life. And I explained to her, I said, I realized that you had a wonderful life, very active, up to age 69. I said, mine was taken away when I was 33. But I said, of course, there's children whose lives are difficult from birth on, or even in the womb. But I said, I had up to age 33, and I said, it was a big adjustment for me to accept that everything was wiped away, except my children. I said, I had my children, and I was so thankful for my children. But, and I said, though, that I had to accept it, and that I was fortunate that I was 33 and not 21 when it happened, or 12, or 3, or that I had life at all. So I said, I understand you had all these years, so maybe it's harder for you to accept and to try to do something that may or may not help. But I said, I've just shared with you what was a miraculous help for me, including that I can't thank God enough. So that it all took time. And then her reactions, yes, it's not an offense against me, it's an offense against God, who created the castor beans. And the people who, in older times, it's an old remedy that it's come to a resurgence, but who experimented around or had maybe insights from their angel and the Holy Spirit on reducing this to an oil, this bean, and using castor oil for many remedies, even a teaspoon, supposed to help digestive issues. But then I'd read, it can be sort of violent, so I didn't do it internally, but I did use it in my navel. It's supposed to soak right down in. And so that was another thing I tried for my nausea issues and things, which all of these things together maybe helped. And turning my negativity and my repeated talking about how awful I felt into a positive. So, but I thought, wow, and it was sort of a bummer for me. Sometimes I have souls that I encounter, and you do too, that you just have to try to shake them off. Shake off that. They bring the devil with them, and it tries to like a flea tries to hop on us and bite us. And we just can't let that happen. So I prayed. I was laying here praying, and I thought, I think that was a day I didn't do a video or something, and I thought I could have been reading Catherine something wonderful and sharing, if I could make sure it's good that I'm sharing with you, and or praying, or Monday I wasn't up yet. Still, I was still down, but I thought, no, God brought this woman, and I knew my main doctor had set her up by going on and on. He darned well knew that I'd had to stop my sport that I tried 2 times, tried it. I wasn't out there still, having a gay old time. He knew I had horrible nausea issues that he couldn't figure out. He was trying to, bless his heart. But he set her up, and I knew it because he knew that she had rebuffed me the first time and wouldn't even share the Mayo Clinic phone number to this doctor. And I did have trouble locating it, but then I didn't bother. I thought, no, that I'm going to stick with the castor oil. It's cheaper. I even told her where to get it, took a picture of the type, and that was $10.50, including delivery. So for 16 ounces of it. But and she said, well, I've got some old around here. Maybe if I do, I just have some. And I wrote back. I said, I wouldn't risk it with something that's really old. For $10.50, you could send her the photo. I said, if you're going to go to the bother that you thought was a bother, I sort of let her have it back nicely, but inserted the words in her language that she gave me. If you're going to go to the bother, I said, if you can afford it. Oh, I knew that would maybe spur her on because she can afford anything that she wants anyway. And she has this new camper or RV and new truck that she hasn't been able to use. She has 5 acres, and so she told me all that the first conversation. So yes, I knew it would get her. If I said, if you can afford it, I would spend the $10.50 to get some fresh, new castor oil, rather than to try it with something that maybe isn't as potent anymore. So I thought, pick up where Dr. M left off and keep working on this woman, because who knows? And the prayers, if she would utter a prayer, maybe God would miraculously heal her. Boom, right there, maybe the magic wand would happen. The magic pill through God. So, but it was, and I even thought, this was a couple of hours. It seemed like I was wrapped up with back and forth and detailing it all, and also working with her personality of not letting her just step on me, and explaining right back why I did the detail, so that she would have every little thing that she needed to know to do to make it even with what I did, including the praying. So, and I thought, no, it wasn't my time. It's God's time that was spent that afternoon. And I thought, how do I not know that that's the most important 2 hours I will have ever spent for a soul? God only knows. So I had to remind myself of that. It's God's time. Everything's God's. My phone that I texted on is God's. He allowed the disability, that I would have disability, and my parents left some money that I could afford an iPhone before I couldn't afford one. My daughter gave me her old one when she needed a new one. So God has always provided for me very well. And I mentioned yesterday, there were many times I should have been dead, and God kept me here. Maybe for those 2 hours I spent texting and detailing everything and trying to encourage her, but being firm. So I don't know, but that's the kind of thing then that put me into sort of a spiritual state, though, of like this little devil flea had bit me and got me sort of yuck feeling, like ooh, and and then I had to draw upon compassion for her, and I did. Then I wrote back yet again, and I said, I do understand how you feel, that you're down and discouraged by what has happened to you, and it doesn't seem fair, and it isn't, other than God allows these things for us to be even better people through it. And please try this castor oil just to see. It's worth a try. So that's the last I've heard of her. And we'll just see what happens. I continue to pray for her. And I do think sometimes it's not really just a devil flea that's bitten us, that's come off of somebody else. Um, Although we do have to guard, we have to put a shield, God's armor, the armor of God around us, that we don't get um, brought down by a soul like that isn't doing well. We just keep praying for the person, and then we move on from it. But again, today I was reminded of it, and I thought, well, it might just be interesting to share about that kind of a situation that comes up in our daily lives, and to take the time. And I just about didn't broach God with her, because I knew from the first time and only time we talked before, in which I spent probably an hour and a half on the phone, because she wanted to go on and on about the Mayo Clinic study and how she was going to get into it. She was sure, and all that she used to do in her life. It's important to listen to people. People have listened to me in years and years of, and I just recently texted my grandson and let him know that I understand he never knew Gaga, um, and how I was before an accident happened. And I wanted him to know a little bit about me before, that I wasn't just a sick, drained out, haggard person in bed complaining about pain or trying to get through, or having one after another of devil beating on me kinds of situations, or things that I would do my research and think temporally I was making a good decision, but it ended up not. But even the ones that ended up not to be temporally a good decision, I learned so much, or I met people who then were instrumental in my life, or maybe me in theirs. Um, I'm the kind of person, and you can be too, where you'll just connect with someone in a Home Depot aisle or a Lowe's aisle. If we're opened up and notice people around us, or they notice, and pretty soon you're talking, and then the person's telling you something about their life. And sometimes that's because we started. They ask something about us, and I'll share short a little. Then they'll say, "Well, all this with me," or they'll say one little thing that you get an idea that they've got something in their life that is hard for them, and you inquire then. Say, well, sounds like you've had a difficult time, or then they open all this up, and then you can tell them, well, I'm a person of prayer, and I'm going to pray for you. And they'll maybe be very happy, or they'll say, well, I'm not, but please do. I need the prayer or something. I've rarely had anyone turn off when I just say, well, I'm a person of prayer, and I'll be happy to pray for you. Or because I've already empathized with them and listened to their story. Everyone has a story. And that's why I love it when people leave comments and tell parts of their story, because part of this vlog, I guess it is in the comments of the community that develops of people and the sufferings they've been through, like coin, shared about his military friend and all he went through and still is as a result of the uh, Sudanese war back in a 1990 era, and what had happened to him based on even chemicals and things and tumors that caused blindness. Now he's blind, has been blind, this soldier who's um, and so every there's so much to share and to have empathy for people and then to pray for them. So that's this woman. Please say some prayers for her. And I understand, and I let her know I understood how we can get stuck then when life is turned on us. In essence, we think it's turned on us. But instead, it's really God opening doors. God opening doors. And so many lessons to learn, which she went to all these different doctors, all that time, God's time spent with that. Went ahead with a surgeon who didn't have a great reputation because he was the only one who would agree to keep messing with her knee and made it worse. Well, I had learned that way back. I had all kinds of people, relatives and friends insisting I go to this surgeon or that one or send my films to here or there. They ultimately got lost being sent places, so I didn't have them for where I lived. But then another friend where I had moved to in my hometown took me to the nearest city. Oh, you've got to see this. The neurosurgeon here is the best. He's the best. He will, like he would know better than Scripps La Jolla, but I went because you get in a point where you don't want to be constantly saying no to people or they get the idea that you don't want to get better. I've had that happen. But their great neurosurgeon point blank told me, he was an older man, and he says, I can tell just by talking with you that you did this, that you don't want to get better. You don't want to work. You don't want to go back to work. Even if you could, you wouldn't. That's what I left there sobbing. And the longtime friend, I used to babysit her children, who had insisted to take me to this doctor, this neurosurgeon. I couldn't even tell her what happened till we were halfway back to the small town. It was just so painful to have someone say that when I had tried everything. Of course I wanted to go back to work and provide for my children, but I then figured out God wanted the children to have a stay-at-home mom, and he allowed that. Somewhere deep inside me, he knew I loved being a mother. And he knew that in my hopes had been I would continue being at home until the children were at school. And then I would go back into education and have summers to be home with them when they had summers off. But my husband at the time was, like I say, controlling. So no, I had to get back, or else, all these different things. And I was weak and put up with that. But I believe that we were married for the length of time needed. That third child needed to be born. That fourth soul was to come and be in that family for reasons that God knows best. And I'm understanding as life goes on more and more why and of their legacy. So I guess be in tune to the circumstances of your day and night. And when I told you about my heavenly, asking God I just said I would just love if I could just have some heaven in my life. I remember that Monday morning. I was exhausted. I was missing my daughters. They were off to college, and it was rainy and gray, and uh, the son was off to school, the boy, and I was in a lot of pain from the rain, the weather shift. Hadn't figured out quite then how the weather affected, but I did in time. And there I did. I had this experience of heaven. It lasted 5 days. And then I had the thought came to my head. Thought came to mind, as we say. Well, ask, where does that thought come to mind from? From God or our angel or the Holy Spirit or someone out there in heaven who's putting the thought there. Ask God, do you have a heavenly name? So I asked, and yes, I did, and I was given that name. It came to mind, this word. This word came to mind. So keep that in mind when something comes to mind. Discern it. And if you're going to ask God, please tell me my heavenly name, if it's going to help me understand more my spiritual progression in this life and the goal of my spirit in this life and on into the next. If it's going to help me, please tell me. I want to do my best to do your will, Lord, and to progress spiritually in whatever ways you want. And if some word or a phrase or something comes to mind, no matter how odd it seems, or like, well, that's like, I said, well, it's the same word as a brand, a name brand of something. I said, well, that just is, and that's when he says, that's your name, you asked, and don't complain. Oh, sorry. And I was sorry. I was shamed. But it was, I wasn't expecting that as the name. But then I looked it up, and it has a wonderful meaning. And it had a meaning that is like a theme that I'm to follow. So ask if a thought or a word comes to mind, or if you meet someone, or you see something on TV, and a word stands out to you, and you think, could that be? And look up the meaning if you need, or the word in the dictionary or online Google. Who has dictionaries? I do, but it's in the bookcase. We use Google. But that's discern and be open and aware. And don't do as I did on Monday, I think it was Monday, where I at first thought I have spent 2 hours messing with this resistant person. Then I realized, not my hours, it's God's time. And God had that for a reason. And I prayed that whatever I had texted to her would sink in, especially the pray. So just a temporal experience, and re-emphasizing that what I share is for you, and you know that and more, as far as utilizing God's time however he wants us to. It's not our time. God bless his real presence in us, and I'm going to take some of God's time next. Oh, I'm going to do this too. I'll do Flannery O'Connor another time. I found this little scrap of paper. I used to keep it in my wallet, and it's so worn down that part of the quote was missing. It was a Flannery O'Connor quote that I just love. I loved her. I go through phases of these different people, but I liked reading her letters and her life, especially. She's another She was a writer and Catholic, and told things as it was, down to earth, died at age 39 of lupus. So let me see if this quote, I guess I'll read this quote. It's pertinent. There are some of us who have to pay for our faith every step of the way, and who have to work out dramatically what it would be like without it, and if being without it would be ultimately possible or not. So there are some of us who have to pay for our faith every step of the way. It's me, anyway, maybe you. And who have to work out dramatically lots of experiences in life, what it would be like without it, and if being without it would be ultimately possible or not. And I have found out it's not possible for me to live without faith. I don't want to be without faith. Faith is what has spurred me on through thick and thin, and it is something that in the worst of times, in the most dramatic of incidents in our lives, even the drama of Monday afternoon, texting with the woman who is most resistant and essentially ungrateful, not to me, but to the castor bean. I'm uphold the castor bean and whoever invented the oil for it back in pioneer times or medieval times. Who knows? Maybe I'll look that up. But I have come to realize that being without faith for me is not possible. And I submit it's not possible really for anyone if they want to live a life that is going to be end up in heaven. We have to have faith if we want to end up in heaven. And from just those 5 days of experiencing just the aspects of heaven that were peace and a release of, I had worries in the temporal world, but they were lifted from me for that week. And my son, he'd come home and I was a different mother in the evenings, even with my pain higher. And I had a totally shifted perspective. It was heaven. And I'm sure, it wasn't. I was still in the temporal, but it was enough of heaven that it was a dramatic shift. And my spirit was uplifted consistently for 5 days. And I had my name. And I can know what that name means and try to follow that all through. And it's always hard temporally to remember these things. But by faith, we are healed. It is in patience and faith that we will possess our souls and we will come to heaven. So, and then here's another one that's really for the woman. I'll say it as a prayer for the woman. Another Flannery O'Connor quote. All human nature vigorously resists grace because grace changes us, and the change is painful. I think that woman has gotten used to being spoiled, and life had been good, her temporal life. But grace was trying to visit her with her knee replacement gone bad. God's grace had tried to come in and show her to something else, God and God's grace. And she vigorously is resisting God and His grace. And humility, what's more humble than a castor bean? And cheap, inexpensive even. It's gone up in price since it's become so popular now. But and the change from ourselves and our own will and our own puffed up experience of we control things and our life is good and we are privileged and we shouldn't have to do all that to feel better. We deserve to be in the experimental program where somebody's going to do something to us that will make us better. We don't have to lift a finger or do a thing. It will all be done unto us by people who are under our control and command. Even that I was going to call her. She wasn't going to call me. That attitude, it's painful. And she's going through a living hell right now. in her life for 4 years because it's not going the way she wants it to go. But she's not willing to give in. She's resisting grace, God's grace. So let that not be ourselves, but we've all been there. We've been there. I thought that I should have something fun to motivate me to to build up my body strength. No, it's not going to be my fun. It's going to be getting up and cleaning up around here, moving around like that, slowly, bit by bit, going up and down the stairs a few times to start building up my legs and my spine. It's not going to be a fun sport. So, so I was resisting. I was resisting grace, the grace of commonality and boring stretching exercises. God knows somebody else wouldn't like to play a sport to build up. That would be, would rather just do the discipline stuff. But God knew me, and so this quote wasn't just for her, but I can see already it's for me. So we're all there, and we continue. That's part of our continuum of our spiritual progression. And why, when I say I experienced heaven for 5 days, it wasn't the fullness of heaven, but it was enough of heaven that I was refreshed. I was refreshed as a single mother with fall and winter coming on, with the weather shifts and the darkness of the days, shorter days, and an active boy that I realized I, still had a lot of work there and I wasn't all that my children needed, and I always knew that. So the heaven refreshed me for my task in the temporal world, my task ahead, and gave me the name that I know for myself now to help keep me on the path that God wants me on. So, all right. God bless His real presence in us, and let us continue loving in God's love as God loves, which that lady on Monday was a bit of a hurdle for me to love. And but I do, very much so, because in many ways I'm her. And that's why God linked us up. I've been there, and I could be there again in just a snap of some nausea coming on me today would probably put me in her attitude. Could anyway, except for what you guys have helped me with, so with suggestions. So, and God's grace. Have a wonderful afternoon.